Hey, Nell and Laurent. Thanks for being here. It's so nice to have you, folks.
Hey, Pratim.
So we launched Gradbot on Thursday, and since then we've been seeing a lot of feedback come in, and things have been crazy on my side for socials. It's been going crazy. Every day I get a lot of notifications. So Nell, how has it been on your side? What kind of feedback are you seeing coming in?
Yeah, so basically Gradbot, that's this new framework we open sourced. It's the main idea is to be able to vibe code a voice agent very easily, to prototype a fun idea that you can express in natural language instructions, and you can materialize it as a voice agent. And so we did a hackathon in London past weekend, and I think what was very clear from it is it makes it so easy for people to be able to create a first version of a voice agent and be able to iterate on it. In the past, we did a few hackathons around voice, and what is very challenging from time to time is a lot of teams don't, at the end of the day, they are a bit disappointed because they could not really even make the orchestration work, because there are a lot of traps and things that are challenging, in particular when you're not used to it. Here, basically, the main idea was to reduce the friction for people who are, newcomers to the field or just have a fun idea that they want to experiment with very quickly. And I think, in particular, for hackathons, for prototyping, developing very, POCs is very nice.
Yeah. I think while we can talk a little bit more in depth with Gradbot, how the architecture has been built, Laurent, that's what I'd love to understand. You're one of the creators of the framework. I'd love to understand with you. But before we go ahead, I can maybe quickly go and show how anyone can build with Gradbot and how you can wipe code. So if that's okay, I'm going to share my screen quickly. So I'm already in the Gradbot repository on my fork. I need the prompt that I want to build today. So let's go ahead. I'm trying to build a voice-enabled history guide app. This app basically helps me understand the historical significance of any place myself while I'm traveling. Now, while you're using the Gradbot skill or even the framework with your coding agent, you do not have to write such a detailed prompt. You can directly just say, build me a voice-enabled history guide app using the Gradbot framework, and your coding agent should be able to figure out everything else based on the repository and the demo apps that are already there. But I wanted to make sure that we can skip through all the process. That's why I have written a very in-depth prompt. You can also go ahead and add more clarity around what kind of persona do you want your agent to have. For example, here I've mentioned that I want a passionate history guide walking alongside the caller, and I want the sentences to be short along with being very accurate about the data and the numbers that it shares. Now, Gradbot allows you to have Gradbot supports tool calling, where you can integrate other tools or other APIs or other features that you want your agent to help you with. And in this app, I have also added some details around how the theme of the front end should look like and how should the app run. What was the idea behind building Gradbot, and what exactly is Gradbot as a framework?
Yeah, so the idea there is to solve a few common pain points when people are trying to build voice agents. At the core of Gradbot, we have a Rust library that will handle the coordination between different components, a speech-to-text model, an LLM, and a text-to-speech model. So we will transcript what the user say, pass it to a large language model with some prompt so that it has some personality, and then it will generate some text that will be converted to audio so that the user ends up listening to some content. The idea there is to keep latency as small as possible. So we want the conversation to be really smooth. So our architecture is entirely streaming. We have a speech-to-text model that will include a voice activity detection layer. So it will detect the end of turn. So whenever you stop talking, then it triggers and immediately sends the text to the LLM. And the idea of streaming there is the LLM starts very quickly to produce some output tokens, and these are immediately converted to speech because at Gradium, we provide an API that is fully streaming. So you can send different chunks of text. You receive chunks of audio as soon as they're ready. And the goal there is to keep the time between the user having finished to talk to the time the agent answers below a second, because that's what makes for some smooth conversation. And if you run things locally or very close to our API, you can have a reaction that is below 500 milliseconds.
Laurent, I just wanted to have some clarity around, you've mentioned latency multiple times and the fact that we are trying to make sure the user has a fast experience. Why is it so important to have low latency when you're working with voice agents or any sort of a voice experience? Just if you could tell a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I guess there it really makes the conversation closer to when you're talking to a human being. If you have to wait for 2 seconds each time you're finished talking, it will be weird to you. And even you will not really know if the agent has heard you correctly. So you're likely to start talking again because you think the agent might not have listened to you. And at that point, obviously, the agent will just start talking at the same time. You will both interrupt each other, so it will be messy. Whereas if the agent start talking like within 500 milliseconds, it's like a human being, so you don't make a difference.
Right. And Nell, if I remember the last time we had a discussion while we were working on Gradbot was also understanding the LLM that's being used inside the orchestration layer, and a lot of things depend on that as well, right? Can you tell a little bit about why the LLM underneath is also important and how that could change the experience for any voice agent?
Yeah, so I think what we are looking for in a voice agent, like in an LLM in that context, and recently there was very good publication by our friends at Pipecat around the topic. It's mainly you need to be able to speak in oral language in a natural, realistic fashion, right? So no bullet points, no M dash, just actual spoken language. You need to be to have a very low time to first token. It's more important than throughput because you don't need to be super fast to generate text. You just need to generate text as fast as listening speed, right? And then the tool call is a big one. And I think Pratim, you yourself, you went through the pain of identifying what makes a good LLM in terms of tool calling. Because maybe we can talk a bit about that later. But you mentioned latency. I think one big aspect around latency is we are always trying to push the latency of the speech components, which are the speech to text and text to speech, as Laurent mentioned. At the same time, when your voice agent is an actual agent with tool calling, a lot of latency and a lot of uncertainty around the latency of the conversation comes from the tool call and how long they will take to execute.
Right.
And being able to make this time enjoyable for the listener and smooth, I think, is a big part of the experience as well.
True. One of the things that when I was working on, so we also had a set of evaluation metrics that we did internally to understand what LLM we would like to have for the demos internally, or even if anyone is building with Gradbot, there will be different kinds of latency experience that developers can get based on the LLM that they're using. And the most interesting part for me, my learning, was that, as Laurent mentioned, not just how big a LLM underneath will affect your voice agent, but also how it is hosted, how the tool calling and tool placement is done in the logic is also very important for the framework. And we have spent a lot of time with this for Gradbot, right, Laurent, that how should tool calling happen? What is the placement of a tool calling, and why that can also completely change the effect and experience around the framework, right?
Yeah, that's right. We definitely spent a lot of time thinking about tool calling and trying different solutions to it. As you mentioned, tool calling might take time, and we don't want the user to have to wait in silence for the tool call to have finished. That's why we worked on something called asynchronous tool calling, and the idea there is pretty simple. It's that the LLM should be able to start a tool call as soon as possible, but not wait for its result and not be blocking on that. Instead, it should continue to produce text that is sent to the user, and that text can, for example, be, I've actually done this for you, let me wait for the result. Like, you can use some kind of fillers for the time being, and at some point the LLM will receive the result of the tool call back and then can include that information to give it to the end user. As Nell mentioned, the idea is that we want the time to be as pleasant as possible for the user, so we don't want them to just have to wait for something or listen to some music while the tool calling is happening.
And this makes me think of something I find very funny is how do people handle this silence? I mean, what I learned from interacting with people developing voice agents and their feedback from their customers, silence is awkward. People hate it, and it should be filled in one way or another. So Laurent mentioned music, which I think is the most vintage one. Maybe so vintage that maybe it's cool again. You have other, like keyboard clicks are quite interesting, but you're not going to do 10 seconds of keyboard clicks every time.
Right.
And and being able to exploit this time, not only to make it enjoyable, but also maybe to transmit an information. I think what is interesting is, let's say you want to book a hotel, and while it looks up locations, it can tell you interesting facts or things happening in the city when you're visiting Tokyo or something like that. So this time now becomes enjoyable and becomes, can be turned into value also for the conversation, which in a way, it's at the end, it can be a significant proportion of the whole time of the conversation when the tool calls are complex and can take a lot of time.
I think while we were discussing about the internals of Gradbot, hopefully my Claude session of building Gradbot along with the skill that I've created is done. Let me just quickly take everyone through the repository and the Gradbot skill, and then maybe we can see how the demo looks. And I haven't tested the demo yet, so let's hope it works. And even if it doesn't work, there's always, we can always go through the code and see what's not working. So on the Gradbot repository, you will find all the demos under the demo folder. You can have, if you're interested in building a game, you can go with Fantasy Shop, which is a haggling game that you can build on top of. If you are interested in something more heavy and you want to see how a 3D game can be built, there is a very extensive 3D game that we have. What is interesting is if you just directly want to close your eyes and wipe code and you're not coming from a technical background, we also have a Gradbot voice agent skill, which you can ask your coding agent to refer to, and the skill should take care of most of the heavy work along with the front end. So it's not just the back end that it will take care of, but the skill also includes the front end part. And the goal of this is to get you started so that you can build your first MVP, and then on top of that, whatever you feel to go ahead with is the best direction. And in terms of features, as Laurent already mentioned, you can have a complete multilingual experience with Gradbot. You can choose to have your agent be in English, French, German, Spanish, and even Portuguese, or you can even keep it multilingual. And the best thing for me when I'm using Gradbot is the fact that the complete voice repository of Gradium is available to use in Gradbot. Or you could just create your own voice. You can use that voice as well. So, okay, now that I have shown a basic idea about how the repository looks like and how you can find your way through, let me just share my screen and see if our demo works today. The whole point of History Guide is to guide me while I'm on my excursions across the world and help me understand what a particular monument is and what's the whole deal around it. Let's try it out.
Hello. I'm so excited to be your guide today. Where are we exploring first?
Hi, I am in Amsterdam today, and I see a lot of buildings here which seem to have a step-like structure in front of their facade. They look like very old buildings, and they have step-like structures. Can you tell me a little bit about these buildings?
Those are called stepped gables, and they were actually designed to make it much easier to hoist goods up into the attic. The styles actually changed over time, from those classic steps to more elegant neck or bell shapes. They really add so much character.
And I am also in front of a canal which seems to be very old and is in the area called as Herengracht. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
The Herengracht is one of the most prestigious canals in the city's famous canal ring. It was actually part of a massive expansion during the Dutch Golden Age in the 17th century. It's even part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is why it feels so special.
So, yeah, Neil, now that we see how Gradbot can be used to build different agents, I'd love to know from you the whole point of why doesn't model company have a framework, and what's Gradbot aimed at, who should use Gradbot, who shouldn't use Gradbot, and everything around it.
Yeah, so indeed we're a model company. So we work with voice agent companies. We work with people working on the orchestration layer. Our models can be accessed through several partners, including LiveKit, Pipecart, Wonderful, and so on. Basically, the history is that we despite the fact that we just make the models, the best way to demonstrate how fast and smooth the whole experience of voice agents is when you use our models is to actually build the voice agent, right? So every time we're having a sales call, or we need to make a demo for a drive-through agent, or for AI tutor, or for cascaded speech translation, whatever, we needed to spin this kind of demos. And it didn't really scale to always have to figure out the specifics of a customer and so on and so forth. So we decided to make a framework that is less deep in features than main orchestration frameworks, where people can use Gradium for their production workloads, but is very convenient at doing things that just works very easily on the first try. In particular, the fact that the semantic VAD is integrated in our STT. Overall, you just have 3 models to handle: speech to text, LLM, text to speech. The orchestration is very simple, and that allows people to develop these voice agents very quickly. So for us, it was a very good way of demonstrating our technology, and in fact, it could also be interesting for people to build with it, because we included, a few examples of tool calls that can gather information, that can do various kind of actions, but people can get much more creative. For example, vision language models are natively supported, and people can do like audio, conversation about images. Speech, cascaded speech translation is one thing you can build with Gradbot, any kind of personal assistant, and so on and so forth. So again, we encourage people to contribute to the repo, share their ideas, games, prototypes, whatever with us. We'll be very happy to, amplify and share the cool stuff that people build with it. Also looking a lot for feedback and being able to improve it. So we've been working in the open source field for years. Laurent much longer than myself. But that's something that we love, and we love also. For us, when you open source something, it's always the beginning of something that we build with the community.
Absolutely. Laurent, do you have any more feedback or any more suggestions for developers who are going to use Gradbot or will be integrating Gradbot with other frameworks? Do you have any suggestions for them?
I don't have much on top of what Nell just mentioned, but just that we can't wait to see what people will build on top of Gradbot, and definitely share what you build with us, and we are very happy to feature your creations on our website.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nell. Thank you so much, Nell and Laurent. It was really great listening from both of you who worked on the framework around how we can move ahead with Gradbot.
Thanks to you, Pratim, for pushing this project, and really looking forward to what people will build with it.
Yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.